Good morning, Mr. Vice President and members of the Council. On behalf of the Commission, I present our 9th report to the Council, joined by my colleagues Barney Afako and Carlos Castresana Fernández. We appreciate the government's cooperation in facilitating our visit to South Sudan last week. In Kwaejok, in Warrap State, we met the Deputy Governor, the state legislators, senior officials, and civil society. At a one-stop center, I heard harrowing accounts of sexual violence. A 7-year-old repeatedly raped by her 19-year-old cousin and silenced by death threats. Her father, pressurized by the community, abandoned justice. A 17-year-old forcibly married off to a 53-year-old man in exchange for cattle. Suffering abuse, was abandoned by her family who refused to return the cattle given in dowry. Sexual violence, of course, in South Sudan remains transactional, and that transactional way of dealing with it further entrenches impunity. In addition, survivors and children born of rape face severe stigma. Conflict-related sexual violence is escalating in Warrap, Tambura, the Upper Nile, and Western Bahr Ghazal, sites of ongoing conflict. Abductions, trafficking, and sexual slavery persist, while a dysfunctional judicial system enables impunity. February this year marks South Sudan's, the world's youngest country's 4th extension of its political transition, and yet key provisions of the revitalized peace agreement remain unimplemented. The unification of armed forces is incomplete, a permanent constitution remains elusive, and long overdue elections are stalled. In Tambura, political clashes have incited ethnic violence, leaving dozens dead and displacing more than 80,000 people. Warrap State, home to many national leaders, is plagued by poverty and inter-communal violence. With no functioning justice system, emergency legislation under the Green Book permits public extrajudicial executions. In 2024, 7 civilians suffocated to death in an unventilated container used as a detention site, and yet the practice continues. Governors and local authorities act as judges and executioners, fueling fear and lawlessness. The national government has failed to rein in the National Security Service, and despite promises, sections 54 and 55 of the National Security Service law enabling unlawful detentions remains intact. The ongoing conflict in 6 of South Sudan's 10 states threatens stability and the fragile peace agreement. Recent clashes in the Upper Nile, Western Equatoria, and Western Bahr Ghazal prompted the African Union Mission in South Sudan, IGAD, UNMISS, and the monitoring mechanism to call for calm, de-escalation, and the swift deployment of unified forces. Corruption and oil revenue exploitation have deepened suffering. Between September 2022 and August 2024, the government generated more than 3.5 billion, 5 times the electoral budget, and yet spent nearly all the remaining oil revenue on the corrupt Oil for Roads program after pipeline damage in February 2024. Meanwhile, oil-producing communities face environmental degradation, displacement, and health crises. Mismanaged oil resources has fueled conflict rather than ensure stability. The conflict in Sudan is further destabilizing South Sudan. A surge of refugees fleeing violence has strained communities already suffering from food insecurity and economic hardship. An influx of weapons is fueling intercommunal violence and strengthening armed groups. And South Sudanese fighters are reportedly being recruited by both sides of Sudan's war. The late John Garang, the first president of South Sudan, imagined a very difficult and different South Sudan, but one in which peace and stability would reign. He said, and I quote, "I want Southern Sudan transformed into the heaven on earth of Africa. But achieving this dream is possible only if the full revitalized agreement is fully implemented to ensure lasting peace and sustainability in South Sudan." Thank you.